In the quiet corners of history, there are a few lives that glow long after they are gone. Not with the brightness of fame or the noise of power, but with something softer, something luminous, a kind of light born from curiosity, patience, and a belief that the smallest discoveries can reshape the world. Tonight, we turn to one such life, a life defined not by comfort, but by an unwavering devotion to understanding the unseen. Before the world knew her name, Marie Curie was simply a quiet girl walking the cobblestone streets of Poland, her arms full of borrowed books, her mind full of questions. In those early years, nothing about the world encouraged her ambitions, yet something deep within her refused to dim. It was a spark, gentle, steady, almost invisible, but powerful enough to guide her through every hardship that followed. As the years passed, that spark carried her across borders, into crowded lecture halls, and eventually into a small, drafty laboratory where the air smelled of metal and the nights stretched endlessly. There she searched for answers hidden inside materials that most people overlooked: rocks, minerals, dust. She believed that even the most ordinary things carried mysteries waiting patiently to be uncovered. And she was right. What began as a quiet study would reveal new elements, challenge what humanity thought it knew about matter, and open the door to a field of science the world had never seen before. It would also demand sacrifices, long hours, exhaustion, isolation, and dangers she could not yet understand. But Marie's determination was gentle and unshakable, like a candle that keeps burning even in a storm. This is not just the story of a scientist. It is the story of someone who followed the smallest glimmer of possibility until it became a light, bright enough to change medicine, physics, and the future. A woman who found beauty in the invisible. A mother, a researcher, a pioneer whose quiet perseverance reshaped the world. So settle in, take a slow breath, and allow the noise of the day to fade away. Tonight, we follow the soft glow of Marie Curie's life, a journey through curiosity, courage, discovery, and the quiet brilliance of a mind that refused to stop searching. Let's begin. From the earliest days of Marie's childhood, Warsaw seemed to breathe in quiet rhythms. The city carried the scent of coal in winter and warm bread in summer, and its narrow streets echoed with the footsteps of children rushing to and from lessons they were never permitted to take openly. Poland was not free then. Its voice had been swallowed by foreign rule, its language pressed into silence, and its schools watched closely by authorities who wanted obedience rather than curiosity. Yet among these muted streets walked a young girl with a heart that refused to quiet itself. She moved softly, books pressed tightly against her chest, her mind focused on the worlds hidden beneath their covers. Her name was Maria Skłodowska, though the world would someday shorten it. She was the youngest of 5 children, raised in a home where education was not just encouraged, it was cherished like a family heirloom. Her father, a teacher who had been stripped of his position for supporting the idea of a free Poland, kept the remnants of his academic life tucked into their apartment. Shelves of scientific instruments lined the walls, some cracked, some dusty, but all meaningful. These were the things he once used to teach physics. Marie would run her fingers across the cool metal surfaces of barometers and lenses, imagining the invisible forces they could reveal. Even as a small child, she sensed there was something magical about understanding how the world works. Something steadying, something freeing. Despite the hardship that clung to their household, the Skłodowska family was rich in ways that didn't show on paper. At night, when candles flickered against the window glass, they took turns reading aloud. History, poetry, mathematics, whatever they could find. The older siblings read with determination, but Marie listened with a stillness that made her father pause sometimes. There was something unusual about the way she absorbed information. She didn't just hear words. She seemed to follow them into the spaces between things, curious about why everything fit together the way it did. But life, even for a family built on learning, did not unfold with ease. When Marie was only 10, her mother fell gravely ill, a slow, exhausting illness that shadowed the home with quiet sorrow. The gentle voice that had once filled the apartment with song became faint, and Marie's father, though strong-willed, couldn't hide the worry etched across his face. Childhood has a way of amplifying uncertainty, yet Marie carried herself with quiet resilience. She helped care for her mother, kept close to her siblings, and continued to excel in school even as fear pressed in from all sides. Loss came gently and devastatingly, leaving an emptiness she would carry with her for the rest of her life. After her mother's passing, the world felt colder, but Marie responded by pulling herself even closer to her studies. The classroom became a place where sadness loosened its grip, replaced by the clarity of equations and the steady certainty of numbers. Teachers noticed her brilliance early. She solved problems faster than most, absorbed lessons with ease, and showed a precision of thought rare in someone so young. But even as her talent drew admiration, it also drew concern. The Russian authorities who controlled education placed limits on how far Polish children, especially girls, could advance. Knowledge was a quiet act of rebellion, and Marie was becoming a rebel without realizing it. Her older sister, Bronisława, equally gifted, dreamed of becoming a doctor. But medical school in Poland was impossible for women. The only option was Paris, a distant world, too expensive for their family to support alone, and so the sisters made a pact, a promise whispered in their shared bedroom late at night, with the moon stretching its light across the wooden floor. Marie would work as a governess to help pay for Bronia's studies. One day, when Bronia became a doctor, she would return the favor and help Marie continue her own education. It was a promise fueled not by hope alone, but by duty, devotion, and the belief that knowledge was worth any sacrifice. And so, at just 16, Marie began one of the most challenging chapters of her early life. She left Warsaw and stepped into the world of private tutoring for wealthy families. In homes decorated with chandeliers and painted portraits, she taught children their lessons while living with the quiet ache of being surrounded by opportunities she could not yet reach. Her days were filled with repetition, teaching, assisting, walking long roads to send letters back to her family, studying late at night by candlelight when everyone else slept. Yet even in these years of quiet struggle, her determination never faded. She borrowed every book she could find, copying entire chapters into her notebooks because she had no money to buy them. Marie studied mathematics, physics, history, and languages with a hunger that never wavered. Knowledge became not just a pursuit, but a refuge. She taught herself to focus through exhaustion, to learn through loneliness, and to build a life around discipline and patience. But hidden beneath this calm ambition was a wound she kept to herself. During her years as a governess, she fell in love with the son of the family she worked for, a gentle, intelligent young man who admired her deeply. But their worlds were different. His parents forbade the relationship. A governess, no matter how brilliant, was not considered an acceptable match. Marie, devastated, left that home with a heartbreak she carried quietly, the way she carried every hardship. Not as something that crushed her, but as something she folded into her determination. She moved to another family, continuing her work, her studies, and her quiet longing for a future she still couldn't quite reach. Winters were bitterly cold, but she walked miles through snow to borrow textbooks from a local library. She read them slowly, letting every page settle in her mind like falling snow. She practiced advanced mathematics alone, solving problems most would struggle with even in a university classroom, and all the while she waited for news from Bronia. waited for the day their pact would become real, waited for the chance to step into a world made of ideas rather than obligations. Years passed before the long-awaited letter finally arrived. Bronya had finished her studies. She had become a doctor, just as she'd promised, and she invited Marie to come to Paris. The pact would be fulfilled. Their shared dream, the one they whispered to each other years ago, was suddenly within reach. But crossing borders was not simple. Marie had little money, no certainty, and no safety net. She would be leaving behind her homeland, her language, and the familiar struggles she had learned to navigate. But she also knew that if she stayed, the limits placed on women in Poland would confine her forever. Her mind, so wide and full of questions, would be forced into a narrow life. And so, with the same quiet bravery that had carried her through childhood loss and years of sacrifice, she made her decision. On a cold November morning in 1891, at the age of 24, Marie packed a small trunk with her few belongings: a notebook, some clothes, a simple blanket, a locket containing a photo of her mother. Her journey would be long, exhausting, and lonely, but she was ready. As she boarded the train that would take her across the border, she watched Warsaw fade through the window, the city that shaped her, the city that tried to limit her, the city she loved, yet needed to leave behind. The landscape changed slowly, forests giving way to rolling hills, villages shifting into towns, the familiar rhythms of Polish speech replaced by foreign languages. She held her coat tightly around her shoulders, both excited and uncertain. The train's gentle motion rocked her into a state of quiet reflection. She thought of her father's scientific instruments. She thought of the pact with her sister. She thought of the invisible forces she longed to understand, forces that moved through matter, through light, through the universe itself. When she finally arrived in Paris, the city greeted her with the scent of rain on cobblestones and the sharp chill of early winter air. It was larger than she imagined, louder, faster, overwhelming in its energy. Horse-drawn carriages rattled along busy streets, and the hum of conversation seemed to drift from every corner cafe. Yet beneath the noise, there was something else, an undercurrent of possibility. Here, ideas were allowed to breathe freely. Here, women could attend lectures, walk into libraries, and choose their own path. Bronya greeted her with tears of joy, and arms wrapped tightly around her. The reunion felt like a beginning, the start of the life Marie had worked so long to reach. But her path in Paris was not smooth. At first, she struggled to understand lectures delivered in rapid French. She lived in a cramped attic room so cold that her ink would freeze overnight. She studied wrapped in blankets, her breath visible in the air, her stomach often empty because she chose books over meals. Yet through every hardship she pressed on with quiet determination. She would walk miles to reach the Sorbonne, her steps echoing softly in the morning silence. And once she sat in the lecture hall, surrounded mostly by men, few of whom viewed her as an equal, she transformed. Her shyness faded, her doubts quieted, her mind sharpened into something focused, steady, and unshakably clear. The curiosity she had carried since childhood ignited fully. She absorbed theories of heat and electricity, mastered equations that stretched across entire blackboards, and began to understand the invisible laws that shape the physical world. Her professors watched in astonishment as the quiet woman from Poland excelled beyond almost everyone in her classes. She topped exam after exam, often studying late into the night until she drifted into sleep at her desk, her fingers still on the pages of her notebook. It was here, in the cold attic and the crowded lecture halls, that Marie discovered the full strength of her resilience. This was the beginning of the life she would eventually become famous for. But at the time, it was simply the fulfillment of a promise. Paris was not a place of comfort for her, it was a place of transformation. Every challenge she faced became another layer of strength. Every hardship deepened her resolve, and every long night spent hunched over equations brought her closer to the discoveries that would one day change the world. But for now, she was simply a young woman studying in a city of endless noise and endless possibility. A woman moving quietly through libraries and laboratories. A woman following the faint glow of curiosity through the dark corridors of uncertainty. A woman on the verge of becoming Marie Curie. Marie's first winter in Paris settled over the city like a pale, shimmering silence. Snow gathered on the rooftops, softening the sharp edges of chimneys and narrow streets, while the Seine moved slowly beneath sheets of ice. At night, lamps glowed through the fog in faint halos, and the chill seemed to slip into every doorway and every room. For most people, the cold was an inconvenience. For Marie, living in the unheated attic she had rented for almost nothing, it was a daily challenge. Yet, despite the frost that formed on her window, despite the ink that stiffened in her inkwell, she felt something she had never quite felt before. Freedom. Her room was small, barely large enough for a narrow bed, a wooden chair, and a desk she had found at a local market. The ceiling sloped sharply, forcing her to duck each time she crossed the room. But there was a skylight just above her desk, and during the day, it filled the space with a soft, silvery light that made the attic feel almost ethereal. At night, moonlight would spill across her open books, illuminating diagrams and equations with a faint glow. Many would have found the conditions unbearable, but Marie loved this tiny, cold hideaway. It was her sanctuary, the first place in her life where the boundaries of the world did not restrict her mind. Every morning she rose early, brushing frost from her hair where it clung to her blanket. The walk to the Sorbonne was long, but she welcomed it. The city was quieter at dawn, the streets still damp from the night, and she moved through them like a shadow. Paris felt alive in a way Warsaw never had. Its energy wasn't loud or heavy. It was a pulse, subtle, rhythmic, full of possibility. Street vendors set up their carts, booksellers arranged stacks of weathered pages, and the air smelled faintly of roasted chestnuts and coffee, drifting from open windows. To Marie it was all a reminder of why she had come. Not for comfort, not for rest, but to learn. Inside the Sorbonne, she became a different version of herself. The shy governess faded away, replaced by a mind sharpened with purpose. She sat in the front row, her pen poised above her notebook as professors filled blackboards with diagrams of heat, electricity, and motion. She hung on every word, her mind racing to connect concepts, patterns, and theories. Even when she did not fully understand, she refused to let confusion discourage her. Instead, she studied until the pieces fit together cleanly in her mind. Her classmates whispered about her quiet intensity, surprised that someone so small, so modestly dressed, could outperform nearly everyone around her. Despite these small victories, life outside the classroom remained difficult. Her finances were so limited that she often skipped meals, choosing instead to spend her money on books or laboratory supplies. She wrapped extra scarves around her waist to stay warm during lectures. Sometimes, when the hunger became unbearable, she would lie down on her narrow bed and wait for the dizziness to pass. But even then, she didn't complain. Each hardship reminded her of the price she had promised to pay for education. And she believed deeply that knowledge, once earned, became its own source of strength. To maintain her focus, Marie established a routine. Lectures occupied her mornings. Afternoons were spent in the libraries or laboratories where she pored over research papers, taking meticulous notes in her clean, careful handwriting. Evenings were reserved for intense study in her attic, where the cold pressed against her skin like a second presence. She would light a small candle, open her books, and lose herself in a world of numbers and theory. Sometimes she worked until the flame flickered out and the darkness reminded her gently that she needed rest. It was during these long, solitary nights that Marie's discipline transformed into something more profound. Her mind began to weave connections others overlooked. Patterns emerged. Laws of nature took shape in her imagination with an almost artistic clarity. She didn't just learn physics, she saw it. She felt it. The invisible forces that govern the universe became her companions, comforting her through the loneliness of her narrow attic. Yet even as she pushed herself to the edge of exhaustion, she remained grounded by small, quiet joys. On rare afternoons when she had a few coins to spare, she stopped by a small cafe near the river. She never bought much, usually just a roll of bread and a cup of tea, but she loved the warmth of the space, the hum of conversations, and the sight of people reading newspapers or sketching ideas on scraps of paper. These ordinary moments, though brief, reminded her that life existed outside of equations and theories. It was a balance she would struggle with for the rest of her life. As months passed, Marie's progress astonished her professors. She excelled not only in mathematics, but also in physics, often achieving the highest scores in her class. Her methods were precise, her reasoning clear, and her dedication unmatched. The Sorbonne, a place where women were still rare, began to acknowledge her presence with growing respect. She was no longer just the quiet Polish student in the front row. She was a rising scholar, though she hardly allowed herself to believe it. Her second year in Paris brought new challenges. The coursework became more demanding, the laboratory experiments more complex, and the pressure to excel intensified. Marie felt the strain, physically and mentally. There were nights when fatigue blurred the lines on the page in front of her, nights when tears formed silently as she reread the same paragraph, unable to make sense of it. But she never allowed herself to stop. She had endured greater hardships before. She had lost family, sacrificed love, and worked tirelessly for years with no guarantee that her dreams would ever be realized. Compared to that, academic struggle was something she could bear. By the end of her studies, Marie achieved something extraordinary. She graduated first in her class in physics, an achievement few women, or men, had ever attained at the Sorbonne. Her accomplishment was not celebrated with grand applause or public recognition. It was marked instead by a quiet moment in which she stood with her diploma in hand, feeling the weight of every sacrifice it represented. She had reached a milestone that once seemed impossible, and yet she knew this was only the beginning. Marie immediately pursued a second degree in mathematics, a goal that pushed her even further into the edges of exhaustion. She continued to live in her cold attic, continued to skip meals, continued to study deep into the night. Her sister, Bronya, offered support, but Marie refused anything more than she absolutely needed. Pride, independence, and discipline drove her actions. She wanted her achievements to belong entirely to her effort. During this period, she became increasingly interested in research. Theoretical knowledge was not enough. She wanted to work with real materials, real equipment, real experiments. She wanted to uncover something, not for glory, but for truth. She was drawn to the mysteries of magnetism, the strange behavior of metals, and the invisible forces that seemed to dance through matter, yet she struggled to find a place to conduct her research. Laboratories were scarce, space was limited, and she was still viewed as an outsider, a foreign woman in a field dominated by men who often dismissed her before she even spoke. Then, late one afternoon, she received an unexpected offer. A Polish professor had noticed her exceptional talent and recommended her to a man named Marie Curie, a quiet, brilliant researcher who worked in a small, underfunded laboratory in Paris. He needed someone meticulous to help with measurements, calculations, and experiments. Marie, eager for any opportunity to step into real scientific work, accepted immediately. She had no way of knowing that this simple decision, this quiet yes, spoken in a borrowed office, would alter the course of her life. The first time she met Pierre, he struck her as gently eccentric. He was tall, slightly awkward, with deep-set eyes that seemed to drift somewhere beyond the present moment. He spoke softly, thoughtfully, almost absent-mindedly, as though his mind existed in two realities at once, the physical world and the world of ideas. Marie, composed and focused, found his manner disarming. They shared a deep love of science, but their personalities were strikingly different. Pierre was warm, idealistic, fascinated by philosophical questions. Marie was disciplined, grounded, and intensely practical. Yet something about their differences fit together seamlessly. Pierre introduced her to the laboratory, a cluttered space filled with dusty instruments, makeshift equipment, and tables stained with years of experiments. It was far from the grand academic facilities she had imagined, but she felt an immediate connection to it. The room hummed with possibility. The scent of metal and chemicals filled the air. This was where she belonged, not in the isolation of her attic, but in a place where her curiosity could move freely. Working alongside Pierre became a turning point in her life. Their minds complemented each other's strengths. Pierre admired her precision and determination. Marie admired his creativity and open-mindedness. They spent long hours discussing experiments, refining methods, and exploring new ideas. Neither realized at first how deeply they were influencing one another, how their partnership was slowly becoming something far more profound. But before their partnership could become a story of love or scientific revolution, Marie had to overcome one final academic trial, her mathematics degree. This last challenge tested her limits in ways she had not anticipated. The coursework intensified, the examinations grew more difficult, and her health began to falter under the weight of constant study. There were days when she barely had the energy to climb the stairs to her attic, days when she felt the old shadows of doubt whispering at the edges of her mind. Yet, as she had done throughout her life, she pushed through. And when the results were announced, she had placed second in the entire university. An extraordinary achievement, though she quietly wished she had achieved first place. Not out of pride, but out of her relentless desire for excellence. With both degrees completed, Marie found herself at a crossroads. She had knowledge, discipline, and a growing reputation. What she lacked was direction, a question worthy of her life's work, something vast, something uncharted, something that would require every skill she possessed. It was Pierre, with his gentle patience and brilliant curiosity, who helped her find it. He encouraged her to explore recent studies on mysterious rays emitted from uranium, rays invisible to the eye, yet powerful enough to leave marks on photographic plates. Scientists couldn't explain their nature. They didn't know why the rays existed or what produced them. For Marie, whose mind had always been drawn to invisible forces, this was irresistible. She resolved to investigate the phenomenon herself, to pursue it with the same quiet, fierce determination that had guided her from Warsaw's cobblestone streets to the cold attic beneath the Parisian sky. And so Marie Curie stepped onto the first path that would lead her toward a discovery no human had yet imagined. A discovery that would change science forever. A discovery that would cost her dearly and define her legacy. This was the moment her real journey began. Not as a student, not as a governess, not as a dreamer, but as a scientist searching for the unseen. When Marie first stepped into the laboratory, where she would conduct her earliest independent research, she felt a quiet thrill that spread through her like warmth. The room was cluttered, dim, and far from luxurious, yet it held a promise no other place in her life had ever offered. Here, she was not a student, or a governess, or a stranger in a foreign city. Here, she was a scientist standing at the edge of an unknown frontier. The air carried the faint scent of metals and dust, and sunlight slipped through the high windows, illuminating suspended particles like tiny stars floating in silence. She moved carefully around the tables, examining equipment that was old, cracked, or rusted from years of use. Most researchers would have turned away from such a space, discouraged by its limitations. But Marie felt none of that. Limitations had never stopped her before. What mattered was not the condition of the tools, but the questions she could chase within these walls. And she had found a question worth everything, a mystery born from the strange rays discovered by Henri Becquerel, rays that seemed to come from inside matter itself. Marie knew she wanted to study those rays. She wanted to understand why certain materials emitted them, why they could pass through paper and metal, why they defied all known explanations. It was a puzzle that fit perfectly with her quiet obsession, the unseen forces that shaped the universe. She gathered uranium salts, set up measurement instruments, and prepared sheets of photographic plate to capture the invisible traces left behind. With each step, she felt a growing excitement, not loud or dramatic, but steady, like a candle burning with unwavering focus. Her method was simple, but her discipline was extraordinary. She measured, recorded, adjusted, then measured again. She repeated experiments countless times, working long hours until exhaustion blurred her vision. Pierre often joined her, offering support, equipment, and eventually something even more meaningful: partnership. He admired her clarity of thought and her ability to persist through difficulty without complaint. She admired his creativity, patience, and the gentle kindness he brought into every interaction. Though their personalities differed, their minds aligned with remarkable precision. One afternoon, as Marie examined her latest set of results, she noticed something perplexing. The uranium samples she tested emitted rays consistently, but another mineral, pitchblende, produced far stronger effects. Far stronger than uranium alone could explain. It was as though the mineral carried a hidden secret, something more powerful than anything she had yet encountered. Her curiosity sharpened instantly. She suspected that pitchblende contained an unknown element, something completely new to science. The idea was bold, almost unthinkable. But Marie did not hesitate. She had learned long ago to trust her instincts. She began grinding pitchblende into fine powders, dissolving it in acids, and separating its chemical components through painstaking processes. Each step took hours, sometimes days, and the work was physically draining. Yet she continued, driven by the possibility that somewhere in the heavy, dark mineral was a hidden spark waiting to be revealed. In those early months, the laboratory became her world. Her days were measured not by clocks, but by experiments, by the rise and fall of instruments, by the glow of photographic plates, by the soft scratch of her pen as she filled notebook after notebook with precise observations. She barely noticed the changing seasons outside. The cold of winter seemed to seep into her bones, and the heat of summer made the laboratory stifling. Yet her focus never wavered. She lived inside her work, guided by a determination that seemed to deepen with every new challenge. Pierre watched her with admiration, often marveling at the quiet strength she carried. He offered assistance whenever he could, helping her refine her measurements and perfect her methods. But he never overshadowed her. He treated her as an equal, respecting her mind with a depth that was rare for the era. Their conversations drifted between science and life, between theories of magnetism and dreams of a future built on discovery. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, their professional partnership began to bloom into something more tender, a connection built on intellect, trust, and mutual devotion. Despite her growing bond with Pierre, Marie's research remained her central focus. She worked tirelessly to isolate the mysterious substance inside pitchblende. But each new breakthrough only seemed to reveal more complexity. The rays, she discovered, were not weakened by time or external conditions. They did not require sunlight, heat, or any external force. The energy came from within the atoms themselves, a revelation that challenged the very foundation of classical physics. It suggested that matter was not inert, but pulsing with invisible power. One evening, as she prepared her notes, a realization settled over her with quiet force. The phenomenon she was studying was not a simple curiosity. It was something revolutionary, a window into the structure of matter that no one had fully understood before. She felt a tremor of awe as she wrote down the word she chose to describe the effect. Radioactivity, a term that would soon reshape science and medicine around the world. The months that followed were some of the most intense of Marie's life. Now certain that pitchblende contained unknown elements, she set out to isolate them, to pull them from the mineral like threads from a tangled web. The work required vast quantities of raw material, more than she could afford. But once again, Pierre stepped in, using his connections to secure a large supply of pitchblende from a mining company that valued his previous research. The labor ahead of them was enormous, but together they were ready. To process the mineral, Marie and Pierre moved their experiments into an abandoned shed owned by the school where Pierre taught. The shed was little more than a long, drafty warehouse with broken windows and a leaky roof. Rainwater often dripped onto their equipment, and the wind rattled the walls so loudly that conversations were swallowed by the noise. But the space was theirs, a place where they could conduct large-scale experiments without interruption. Marie spent hours stirring boiling cauldrons of pitchblende, her hands blistered from heat and chemicals. She inhaled fumes that clung to her skin, unaware of the danger they posed. The air in the shed was thick with smoke and dust, but Marie barely noticed. She had endured far worse in her journey. Physical discomfort was part of discovery. And so she pressed on, determined to reveal the identity of the invisible fire hidden inside the mineral. At night, after long hours of exhausting labor, she would check the results with Pierre. They examined samples, weighed them, tested them, and compared their notes. Some nights they felt triumphant, other nights frustrated, but always they returned the next day to try again. Their persistence gave the shed an almost sacred atmosphere, a temple of inquiry where two minds labored side by side in pursuit of the unknown. Slowly, painfully, the new element began to unveil itself. The substance they isolated glowed faintly in the dark, a soft blue light that Marie found quietly mesmerizing. It was beautiful in a way she could barely describe, ethereal, otherworldly, and it was powerful, far more radioactive than uranium. She named this new element polonium in honor of her beloved homeland, Poland, a tribute to the country whose spirit she carried in every step she took. But Marie knew the work was not done. Pitchblende still held more secrets. Her measurements revealed yet another substance, even more radioactive than polonium. Isolating it became her new obsession. She returned to the shed with renewed determination, repeating the same back-breaking processes, stirring heavy mixtures, and evaporating solutions until her hands ached and her muscles trembled. Pierre begged her to rest, but she refused. She could feel the presence of something extraordinary hidden within the dark mineral. She only needed to find it. Then, at last, after months of relentless work, she isolated a tiny amount of a nearly pure form of the substance. Its glow was unmistakable, brilliant, steady, almost celestial. Marie named it radium, a word that would soon echo across the world. She held the small sample in her hand, watching the faint light shimmer in the shadows. In that moment, she felt both exhilarated and humbled. She had uncovered something powerful, something no human had ever seen, something that seemed alive with energy. Radium would become one of the most significant discoveries in the history of science. But in that quiet moment inside the dim shed, Marie didn't think of fame or recognition. She thought only of the journey that had brought her here, the cold attic in Paris, the long nights of study, the sacrifices she had made since childhood. She felt gratitude, not pride, and she felt certainty that her work was just beginning. Her discovery rippled through scientific circles with astonishing speed. Researchers across Europe marveled at the idea that matter could release such energy, that elements could decay into other substances, that atoms were not permanent, but dynamic. Marie had opened a door no one knew existed, and behind that door was a new universe of possibilities, explanations for the sun's heat, insights into the structure of atoms, medical applications that would someday save countless lives. Yet, even as accolades began to gather at her feet, Marie remained focused on her work. She wanted to understand every detail, every implication, every mystery the new elements presented. She refused to let success distract her. She didn't seek attention. She didn't crave awards. What she desired more than anything was time to follow the invisible threads of science wherever they led. Pierre felt the same. Together they continued to experiment, analyze, and explore, deepening their partnership with every passing day. Their shared pursuit became a language between them, a bond forged not just in love, but in a common calling. In the quiet hours of the evening, they walked home side by side, their hands sometimes brushing, their minds still turning over equations and theories. Their connection grew slowly, naturally, like something inevitable. But beneath the glow of their discoveries lay a truth neither understood yet. The rays they studied, the glowing light that fascinated them, the invisible fire they had unveiled, was dangerous. Their hands tingled after handling radioactive samples. Their skin reddened. Their notebook, stored near radium, glowed faintly in the dark, yet they paid little attention. They believed they were witnessing the future, and they were. But the future came with a cost they would learn only too late. For now, though, Marie stood on the threshold of greatness. She had discovered polonium. She had isolated radium. She had named radioactivity. And she had done it all with quiet determination, enduring hardship after hardship with unwavering grace. Her journey was far from over, but she had taken her place among the world's greatest minds, reshaping science with every step. As she walked through the dim shed one last time that winter evening, she paused to look at the faint glow of radium on the table. It shimmered gently like a heartbeat in the dark. Marie didn't know what the world would say or how far her discovery would reach. She only knew that the invisible fire had finally revealed itself, and she had been the one to bring it to light. In the months that followed the discovery of polonium and radium, the tone of Marie's life shifted in a way she had never experienced before. The quiet determination that once lived only within her laboratory notebooks began to echo outward, catching the attention of scientists across Europe. Articles appeared in journals, letters arrived from curious researchers, and invitations to speak floated into her hands more often than she could answer. Yet for all the growing recognition, Marie remained anchored in her work. The world might have been waking up to her discoveries, but she had no time to bask in admiration. She and Pierre were still knee-deep in experiments, still stirring heavy solutions in their drafty shed, still following the glow of possibilities that seemed to widen each day. Their work became fused with their lives in ways neither expected. Marie had always believed in discipline, structure, and long hours of quiet concentration. Pierre approached science differently. His mind drifted across questions with a sort of poetic wonder, wandering down theoretical paths that others might dismiss as impractical. Yet, when they worked together, something remarkable happened. Her precision balanced his imagination. His curiosity softened her intensity. It was as though they had found a rhythm that made impossible work feel not only achievable, but natural. They ate simple meals in the laboratory, often forgetting the time. They talked through experiments on long walks home, their footsteps echoing softly through the narrow Parisian streets. Their conversations were gentle, steady, and filled with the kind of trust that only grows when two minds move in harmony. For Marie, who had spent most of her life fighting quietly for every opportunity, This partnership felt like a gift, a rare alignment of purpose and companionship she never dared hope for. Yet she welcomed it with the same calm focus she applied to her research. Pierre, too, found himself drawn toward Marie, not just as a colleague, but as something far more meaningful. He admired her resilience, her quiet strength, and the way she carried her history like a gentle flame that refused to be extinguished. He often said she brought clarity to his mind, grounding his thoughts in reality while allowing him to explore new frontiers without fear of losing his direction. Their bond grew slowly, opening like a flower in the early days of spring, gradually but with certainty. It was no surprise that Pierre eventually gathered the courage to confess his feelings. He did so not with dramatic gestures, but with the same quiet sincerity that defined his life. He spoke of admiration and respect, of the joy he felt in her presence, and of a future he hoped they might build together. Marie listened, moved by his words, but cautious. Marriage, she believed, should never interfere with her scientific work. Her independence was precious, and she feared that dedicating herself to a partner might pull her away from the ambitions she had carried since childhood. But Pierre understood her fears before she even voiced them. He promised her a marriage that would not restrict her, but uplift her, a union built on equality, partnership, and scientific pursuit. He promised that her research would remain her own, that her ambitions would be celebrated, not questioned. And he offered something rare, a companionship rooted not in tradition, but in shared purpose. Marie, moved by his sincerity, gave her answer. They would marry. Their wedding was simple, held without extravagance. Marie wore a modest blue dress, a dress she would later use as a laboratory garment, and Pierre rode beside her on a bicycle as they traveled through the countryside for their honeymoon. Instead of jewels, they spoke of physics. Instead of lavish celebrations, they breathed in the calm breeze of open fields. It was a beginning exactly suited to the people they were, humble, thoughtful, and entirely devoted to discovery. After their marriage, Marie and Pierre returned to their research with renewed energy. Their shared life made the long hours feel lighter, and their collaboration deepened in ways neither expected. Each morning, they walked together to the laboratory where sunlight filtered through dusty windows and illuminated the scattered equipment like a quiet blessing. They worked side by side, sharing insights, laughter, frustrations, and triumphs. Their laboratory, though humble, became a place of brilliance, a sanctuary where curiosity flourished. Yet, as their discoveries gained recognition, so too did the weight of expectation. Universities invited Pierre to speak, scientists wrote to Marie with questions, and journalists began requesting interviews. Fame, though still distant, cast the first faint shadow across their work. Pierre, ever gentle, tried to shield Marie from unnecessary attention, knowing she preferred the quiet hum of experiments over the noisy world beyond their shed. But even he could not stop the growing wave of curiosity surrounding their discoveries. One of the turning points came when Marie submitted her doctoral thesis, a detailed, groundbreaking explanation of radioactivity, featuring her meticulous measurements and conclusions. When the examiners read her work, they were astonished. They had never seen research so precise, so insightful, and so completely transformative. Her thesis did not merely add knowledge, it redrew the boundaries of physics and chemistry. The thesis was accepted with unanimous praise, and Marie became the first woman in France to earn a doctorate in physics. It was a moment of triumph, yet Marie observed it with her usual calm. She did not seek applause or special treatment. She returned to the laboratory that same afternoon, eager to continue her work. Pierre, however, could not hide his pride. He spoke of her brilliance to colleagues, insisting that her discoveries were among the greatest in modern science. His admiration was genuine and unreserved, a testament to the deep bond they shared. As the world absorbed the implications of their research, Marie and Pierre found themselves stepping into a spotlight they never sought. Invitations arrived from across Europe, requesting lectures and collaborations. Their names began appearing in newspapers, often alongside descriptions of their miraculous glowing elements. And while the attention was flattering to some scientists, to Marie it felt distant and unnecessary. What mattered was not recognition, but truth. Their greatest achievement, the isolation of radium in its pure form, captured the imagination of the scientific community. Radium's shimmering blue glow became a symbol of modern discovery, a visual reminder that the universe held secrets beyond anything humanity had yet imagined. Laboratories across the world attempted to replicate the Curie's work, often sending letters asking for guidance. Marie responded to as many inquiries as she could, sharing her methods openly, without fear of losing credit. She believed deeply in the advancement of knowledge, not in competition. Pierre took particular joy in the more philosophical implications of radioactivity. He spoke often about the nature of atoms, about energy contained within matter, about the possibilities that lay in this new understanding. He wondered whether the sun's heat might be explained by radioactive processes, whether atoms were not solid at all, but complex structures filled with unseen forces. Marie, though equally fascinated, remained anchored in measurement, method, and careful observation. Their minds complemented each other beautifully, each offering perspectives that strengthened the research they conducted. Yet, beneath their success, an invisible danger lingered, one they still did not fully understand. Their hands tingled after long hours in the laboratory, their fingertips sometimes reddened or cracked. Their notebooks glowed softly under the influence of radium. They carried samples in their pockets, placed them on their bedside tables, and handled radioactive substances with no protection. They saw these effects as curiosities, not warnings. After all, how could something so beautiful, so full of light, be harmful? But as months became years, Marie began noticing subtle changes. She felt fatigued more often. Cuts on her hands healed slowly. Pierre had similar symptoms, unexplained soreness, bouts of weakness, yet neither connected these physical changes to their research. The idea that radioactivity could cause harm was unimaginable at the time. They believed they were witnessing progress, not danger. Even so, their dedication never faltered. They continued to refine their measurements, improve their techniques, and explore the nature of radioactive elements. Their laboratory became a place of pilgrimage for curious scientists, all eager to learn from the couple who had opened a new door in physics. Marie, though humble, guided them with patience, explaining her methods and showing them the equipment she had built herself. By 1903, the impact of their work had grown impossible to ignore. Word reached them that their names were being considered for the highest scientific honor in the world, the Nobel Prize. At first, they dismissed the idea as improbable. After all, Marie was still viewed by many as a modest assistant rather than the driving force behind the discoveries. But advocates within the scientific community, aware of her crucial role, pushed strongly for her inclusion. In December of that year, the announcement came. Marie and Pierre Curie, together with Henri Becquerel, would receive the Nobel Prize in Physics. Marie became the first woman to win a Nobel Prize, an honor that reverberated across the scientific world. Newspapers celebrated her achievement, often focusing not on her brilliance, but on the novelty of a woman receiving such a distinction. Marie accepted the recognition with grace, though she felt uneasy about the attention. She saw herself not as a symbol, but simply as a researcher doing her work. Pierre, overcome with pride, expressed his joy more openly. He spoke candidly about their journey, about the years spent in the freezing shed, about the challenges they faced as outsiders. But above all, he spoke of Marie, of her precision, her perseverance, her relentless pursuit of truth. He insisted that the discoveries were hers as much as his, if not more. The Nobel Prize brought financial security, recognition, and new opportunities. It also brought increased pressure. Invitations multiplied, and the Curies found themselves navigating the demands of public life. Yet even as the world celebrated their accomplishments, they remained grounded in their routines. The laboratory still called to them. The research still begged for completion. Fame, they believed, was temporary. Science was eternal. One evening, after a long day of ceremonies and congratulations, Marie and Pierre walked home under the soft glow of lamplight. Paris felt unusually quiet, the streets calm, the air cool. Marie carried the weight of the Nobel Prize not as a trophy, but as a reminder of the responsibility she had to truth. Pierre squeezed her hand gently, sensing the swirl of emotions she didn't voice. They paused on a small bridge overlooking the river, watching the water ripple under the moon. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Pierre said softly, "We have opened a door, Marie, and I think the world has only just begun to step through." Marie nodded, her eyes reflecting the steady glow of the lamps. She understood exactly what he meant. Radioactivity was not the end of their journey. It was only the beginning. And together, side by side, minds intertwined, they would continue to follow the invisible light that had guided them from obscurity to discovery. The years following the Nobel Prize brought a strange mixture of triumph and turmoil into Marie and Pierre's lives. Recognition, once distant and unnecessary, now arrived with the weight of expectation. Their names began appearing not only in scientific journals, but in newspapers, magazines, and lecture programs throughout Europe. Invitations piled up in neat stacks on their desk, each carrying a promise of prestige. Yet, for all the admiration they received, Marie often felt more overwhelmed than honored. Her heart belonged in the quiet of the laboratory, not the grand halls where people gathered to applaud. The sudden attention also disturbed the natural rhythm of their work. Days that would once have been spent at the shed or the Sorbonne were now interrupted by visitors, journalists seeking interviews, scientists eager to witness the glowing elements firsthand, even politicians hoping to align themselves with the brilliance of discovery. Marie greeted them with politeness, but her patience was thin. She had no interest in fame. What mattered to her were measurements, observations, the delicate patterns of experiment and truth. She missed the days when she and Pierre worked alone, surrounded by nothing but silence and possibility. Pierre struggled with the attention in a different way. He had always been introspective, gentle, and deeply thoughtful, the kind of man who preferred quiet contemplation to public praise. The demands placed upon him after the Nobel Prize often unsettled him. While he was proud of their achievements, he felt unprepared for the responsibility that followed. He worried that the world would misunderstand their intentions, twisting their discoveries into mere spectacle. And he feared that the growing demands on their time would pull them away from the work that gave their lives meaning. Despite their discomfort, the Curies carried on. They accepted only a fraction of the invitations they received, choosing instead to pour their energy into the continued study of radioactivity. They were determined to deepen the understanding of radium and polonium, to refine their measurements, explore their properties, and catalog their effects. But as months passed, Marie began to notice subtle changes in both of them. Their hands bore persistent burns. Their skin reddened without clear cause. They felt fatigue more easily, and sometimes sharp pains radiated through their joints. Though they did not yet know the danger of radiation, the toll it took was already beginning to surface. Still, the work pulled them forward. Marie could not ignore the potential radium held for medicine. Doctors had begun experimenting with small samples, noting its ability to shrink tumors and destroy unhealthy cells. The possibilities were extraordinary, a ray of hope for illnesses that had long been seen as incurable. Marie found deep purpose in this potential, imagining a future where radium could ease suffering and extend life. She felt a quiet sense of responsibility, knowing that her discoveries might reshape the boundaries of medicine. It was a weight she carried not with fear, but with profound humility. As the demand for radium grew, Marie realized how valuable and scarce it truly was. Extracting even a tiny amount required tons of raw pitchblende, weeks of labor, and immense patience. But she was determined. She and Pierre spent long hours refining their techniques, optimizing their processes, and finding new ways to isolate pure samples. The abandoned shed became a landscape of boiling cauldrons, heavy stirring tools, and containers filled with solutions in various stages of separation. Each pot held the promise of progress, the slow distillation of something that seemed almost alive. Their work consumed them so completely that they sometimes forgot to rest. Marie often returned home late, her hands aching from stirring thick mixtures, her clothes dusted with residue. Pierre, equally exhausted, sometimes fell asleep at his desk, surrounded by stacks of data and theories waiting to be tested. Yet for all the hardship, there was a quiet joy that ran beneath their exhaustion. They were doing what they were born to do, shaping the future through curiosity and devotion. But the growing pressure weighed heavily on Pierre. His health deteriorated more quickly than Marie realized. The burns on his hands deepened, and he felt waves of weakness that forced him to sit down unexpectedly. He complained of headaches, dizziness, and strange sensations that he couldn't quite describe. Marie worried, urging him to rest, but Pierre resisted. He believed that the work mattered more than his discomfort. He believed that Marie needed him, and he believed that stepping away, even temporarily, would slow the momentum they had fought so hard to build. Their lives took an emotional turn when they welcomed their second daughter, Eve. After years of hardship, loss, and relentless work, the arrival of their child brought a new softness into their home. Irene, their first daughter, adored her younger sister, and the Curies found gentle joy in the quiet moments of parenthood. Bedtime stories, shared meals, the laughter of children echoing through the house. Marie balanced motherhood with her research, often studying late into the night after her family had drifted to sleep. Pierre, though devoted to his work, cherished his daughters deeply, finding solace in their presence. Yet even the warmth of family could not erase the growing sense of unease that lingered around their research. The glowing samples they handled so casually, the vials they kept in their pockets, the notebooks they stored beside radioactive materials, all of it carried unnoticed danger. Marie often worked with sleeves rolled up, her hands exposed to unsafe levels of radiation. She would press her face close to samples, fascinated by the brilliance they emitted. Pierre did the same, mesmerized by the luminous blue glow. They believed they were witnessing something magical, unaware that the magic carried a hidden cost. Meanwhile, the scientific community expanded its understanding of radioactivity at a rapid pace. Researchers replicated the Curie's experiments, found new uses for radium, and built upon the foundations Marie and Pierre had laid. The world grew increasingly interested in their discoveries, and Marie, though reluctant, recognized the importance of sharing their findings. She wrote papers with careful detail, presented her research with calm precision, and explained her methods with humility. Her voice was soft but steady, her mind sharp and unwavering. As the years progressed, Marie found herself increasingly at the center of debates surrounding the medical uses of radium. Some scientists expressed concern about the unknown risks, while others hailed it as a miracle substance capable of transforming medicine. Marie held a balanced view. She believed in the power of radium, but insisted on caution. She refused to patent the process of isolating it, choosing instead to make her methods free for the world to use. It was a decision that spoke to her character. She valued truth and healing over personal wealth. Pierre stood firmly by her side, supporting her decisions and sharing her dedication to open scientific collaboration. But his health continued to decline. He became increasingly pale, increasingly tired, increasingly fragile. Marie, though concerned, did not yet connect his symptoms to radiation. Their understanding of the risks remained limited, and the idea that their discoveries could harm them felt counterintuitive. They were explorers, pioneers, working with phenomena no one had fully grasped. They accepted discomfort as part of scientific progress. Then came the pressures of administration. Pierre was appointed to a prestigious position as the chair of physics at the Sorbonne, a role that demanded lectures, meetings, and responsibilities he had never sought. He struggled to balance these obligations with his research, and the strain weighed heavily on him. Marie noticed the shift, the fatigue in his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the moments when he seemed lost in thought. She tried to ease his burden, offering to help with calculations and administrative tasks. But Pierre often insisted on carrying the weight himself. Through it all, they remained tightly connected, partners in love, in science, and in destiny. They walked together through the gardens near their home, speaking softly about theories and questions they still hoped to explore. They watched their daughters grow, marveling at the innocence of childhood. And they continued returning to the shed where the glow of radium whispered possibilities into the dim air. By 1906, Marie felt a quiet confidence growing within her. Their discoveries were reshaping the world. Radium had entered hospitals. Radioactivity had become a field of study. Their name, once unfamiliar, had become synonymous with brilliance. Yet she sensed that something within Pierre was unraveling, a heaviness that clouded even his brightest moments. She urged him repeatedly to take breaks, to rest, to step away from the pressures of the Sorbonne. But Pierre refused. He wanted to protect her from the weight of expectations, believing that he must bear the burden for both of them. Everything changed on a rainy afternoon in April. Pierre, exhausted and distracted, stepped into a Paris street crowded with carriages and carts. In a single tragic moment, he slipped under the wheel of a heavy horse-drawn wagon. The impact was immediate, devastating, and irreversible. The news spread through Paris like a cold wind. By the time Marie arrived, Pierre was gone. The world mourned a brilliant scientist. Marie mourned something far deeper, her partner, her confidant, her equal, the man whose life had been woven into hers with quiet precision. The loss struck her with a force she could barely comprehend. She felt as though a part of her had been torn away, leaving behind a hollow ache that no discovery could ever fill. She returned home that evening, the city blurred by tears, the world shrouded in unbearable silence. In the days that followed, she drifted through her routines in a fog. She cared for her daughters with trembling hands, answered condolences with numb politeness, and walked alone through rooms that once echoed with shared conversation. In her grief, the laboratory felt distant, both a reminder of Pierre's brilliance and a painful echo of his absence. But grief, though heavy, could not extinguish the flame Pierre had helped ignite within her. Slowly, painfully, she returned to the work they began together. She stepped into his lecture hall, facing rows of students who rose in silent respect. She accepted his position at the Sorbonne, becoming the first woman to teach there. And she continued her research with quiet determination, carrying forward the legacy they had built. Pierre's death marked the end of their shared journey, but not the end of the light they discovered. For Marie, the work was no longer just a pursuit of knowledge. It had become a promise to carry their brilliance into the future, even if she must walk the remaining path alone. In the weeks after Pierre's death, the world around Marie seemed suspended in a kind of heavy silence. Paris carried on with its usual rhythm. The clatter of carriages, the murmur of crowds, the distant ringing of bells. Yet for her, everything felt muted, as though she had stepped behind a thin veil that separated her from the living. She moved through each day with careful, deliberate motions, tending to her daughters, answering letters of condolence, and attempting to maintain routines that felt hollow without Pierre walking beside her. Even the air in their home carried the ache of absence, settling into corners like dust that refused to be swept away. Marie found herself lingering over his books, his handwriting, the small tools he used in their laboratory, feeling the weight of the life they had built together slip painfully into memory. Yet beneath the grief, there was something else, something quiet but unbroken. It was the same force that had carried her across borders, guided her through sleepless study, and fueled the discoveries that changed the world. It whispered to her gently in the late evening hours when she sat alone by her desk, a reminder that the work she and Pierre began did not vanish with his passing. It lived in the notebooks they filled side by side. It lived in the experiments they designed together, and it lived in the luminous elements that still glowed softly in the shadows of their laboratory. Even in grief, that faint glow called to her. Returning to the laboratory for the first time after his death was one of the hardest moments of Marie's life. The shed felt unchanged, cluttered, dusty, filled with the familiar smell of metal and chemical fumes, yet everything inside it seemed to carry Pierre's presence. His jacket still hung on a hook. His notes lay open on the table. His handwriting traced along the margins of diagrams she had not yet finished reading. She stood in the doorway, unable to move for several minutes, her breath quivering as she took in the scene. But once she stepped forward, once her hands touched the worn wooden table, she felt a strange sense of clarity. This was where she belonged. This was where she would continue. Marie threw herself into work not as a distraction from grief, but as a way to honor Pierre's memory. Each measurement she recorded, each experiment she repeated, felt like a continuation of a conversation she and Pierre had started long before. She kept his notes close, studying them with reverence, seeing not only the brilliance of his mind, but the tenderness of the life they shared. Long hours passed quietly as she refined their methods, improved their techniques, and pushed forward the research they once pursued as a team. She worked until exhaustion forced her to stop, often returning home with trembling hands and heavy eyes, but with a sense of purpose that slowly steadied her. Her daughters became her anchor during those early months. Irene, thoughtful and serious, tried to act older than her years, helping with small tasks and watching over her younger sister with gentle protectiveness. Eve, too young to understand the magnitude of their loss, brought moments of innocence that softened the edges of Marie's sorrow. At bedtime, Marie sat beside them, reading stories in a quiet voice, her mind drifting between fiction and the memories of Pierre's laughter, as he once read the same tales. In those tender moments, she allowed herself to feel the ache of what had changed, but she also felt the warmth of what remained. The scientific community responded to Pierre's death with deep sympathy. Colleagues offered support, universities extended their condolences, and newspapers mourned the loss of a brilliant mind. Yet in the midst of the grief, there was a decision to be made, one that would shape the direction of Marie's life. Pierre's position at the Sorbonne had been left vacant, a prestigious post few imagined could be filled by anyone else. But Marie, to the astonishment of many, was offered the role. It was unprecedented. Never before had a woman taken a professorship at the Sorbonne. The significance of the moment stood like a quiet threshold before her. The day she stepped into the lecture hall for the first time, students rose to their feet in solemn respect. She walked slowly to the front of the room, Pierre's notes in her hands, feeling the weight of her new position settle gently on her shoulders. The room was silent as she adjusted her spectacles, placed the papers on the desk, and looked out at the rows of waiting faces. When she spoke, her voice was steady, calm, and soft, the same voice she used when explaining experiments to Pierre late at night. Her first lecture as the Sorbonne's first female professor began not with her own words, but with Pierre's, as she read directly from his final notes. It was her quiet way of bringing him into the room she now guided alone. Her teaching was clear, precise, and deeply committed to the truth of science. Students quickly recognized her brilliance and dedication, and attendance grew with each passing lecture. Yet Marie never viewed her position as a symbol of progress or a victory for women, though others certainly did. She saw it as a responsibility, a continuation of work that mattered not because of her identity, but because of the discoveries still waiting to be made. Her humility, sharpened by grief, made her even more respected among those who admired her. Outside the university, Marie's research deepened with renewed intensity. She sought to understand radioactivity more fully, to explore its properties, and to refine the methods that she and Pierre had developed together. She studied the decay of elements, the transformation of matter, and the strange, persistent energy emitted from substances that seemed otherwise inert. Each discovery unfolded slowly, like petals opening to reveal deeper mysteries. Marie recorded every observation meticulously, filling notebook after notebook with data that would later become the foundation of modern nuclear science. Yet the shadow of radiation's danger grew silently alongside her progress. Her hands bore scars from burns that never fully healed. Her bones ached. She felt persistent fatigue that lingered despite rest. But she did not slow down. She believed that her responsibility, both to science and to Pierre's memory, outweighed any discomfort. She worked late into the night, often forgetting to eat, sometimes forgetting to sleep. The glow of radium on her desk became a constant companion, shimmering like a quiet reminder that she was still walking the path she and Pierre had begun. By 1910, Marie had reached a point of profound achievement. After years of careful separation, she succeeded in isolating pure radium metal, a task most scientists had deemed impossible. The accomplishment was monumental, opening new doors in chemistry and medicine. Her meticulous documentation of the process provided a blueprint for future researchers, further solidifying her place among the great scientific pioneers. She published her findings in a comprehensive book on radioactivity, a masterwork of precision and insight that astonished even her strongest admirers. But success brought its own turmoil. As Marie's fame grew, so did public scrutiny. Newspapers followed her personal life, sometimes twisting truth into sensational stories. Rumors circulated, fueled by jealousy and prejudice. Some questioned her integrity, others her place in the scientific world. Yet through every storm, Marie remained calm. She kept her focus on her daughters, her research, and her teaching. She refused to engage with gossip, believing that only her work would endure. Despite the pressures, another honor awaited her, one that would once again reshape the course of her life. In 1911, she was nominated for a second Nobel Prize, this time in chemistry, for the isolation of radium and polonium, and her pioneering work on radioactivity. The nomination sparked intense debate within the committee, and the controversies surrounding her personal life threatened to overshadow her scientific contributions. But the truth of her brilliance prevailed. Marie Curie became the first person in history to win 2 Nobel Prizes. She accepted the award with quiet dignity, her expression calm, her words composed. She spoke not of fame or triumph, but of the work, the science, and the future she hoped her discoveries would shape. She dedicated the honor to Pierre, whose memory she carried like a steady flame. It was a moment that lifted her from the weight of grief and reaffirmed the purpose that guided her through the darkest years. Yet even as the world celebrated her once more, Marie's health continued to decline. The symptoms she had ignored for years, the fatigue, the weakness, the persistent ache in her bones, grew more pronounced, but she did not slow her pace. Instead, she chose to expand her efforts, focusing on the creation of a new laboratory dedicated to the study of radioactivity. She dreamed of a place where future generations could learn, discover, and build upon the foundations she had laid. She worked tirelessly to secure funding, collaborate with universities, and design a laboratory that would reflect the highest standards of scientific research. Her determination was unwavering, even when she felt unsteady on her feet, even when her vision blurred or her hands trembled. She continued to push forward. She believed deeply that science was a gift, one worth pursuing with all the strength she possessed. And she believed that her responsibility extended beyond her lifetime. By the time the laboratory neared completion, Marie had created something remarkable, a legacy that blended grief and achievement, memory and discovery. She had carried Pierre's dreams into the future. She had raised daughters who grew up surrounded by science and love. And she had redefined what a woman or any person could accomplish when guided by purpose. Late one evening, standing alone in the nearly finished laboratory, Marie felt an unusual stillness settle around her. She touched the cold surface of a metal table, imagining the experiments that would soon unfold upon it. The room, quiet and empty, seemed to pulse with potential. In the silence, she closed her eyes and breathed deeply, feeling both the weight of her journey and the quiet triumph of reaching a place she once thought impossible. She had walked through grief, through hardship, through doubt and controversy, yet she had never stopped moving toward the light. And the light, the invisible fire she and Pierre had discovered together, had never stopped guiding her forward. When the first distant rumblings of war reached Paris in the summer of 1914, Marie felt a subtle but unmistakable shift in the air. It wasn't loud at first. It wasn't the roar of cannons or the march of soldiers, but a quiet unease that settled over the city like an early fog. People whispered on street corners, newspapers grew heavier with worry, and the steady rhythms of everyday life slowed with a tension no one could quite name aloud. Marie, who had always focused deeply on her work, sensed the change with a clarity that unsettled her. The world she had fought so hard to understand seemed suddenly fragile, its order trembling beneath the weight of something vast and uncontrollable. When war was officially declared, the quiet unease turned into a tidal wave of urgency. Soldiers marched through the streets with determined faces, families gathered around radios, and the once busy avenues emptied as fear spread across the country. Laboratories closed, universities halted classes, and buildings once dedicated to learning were converted into hospitals. Marie watched the transformation with a heavy heart, knowing that science, the steady anchor of her life, would not be shielded from the chaos that approached. Yet, even as the world fractured, Marie felt no desire to leave France. It had become her home, the place where she found her purpose, her love, her work, and her identity as a scientist. She refused offers to escape to safer countries, insisting that her daughters and her research stayed exactly where they had taken root. She believed that even in war, truth mattered, and even in chaos, she could still serve. Within weeks of the conflict intensifying, wounded soldiers began flooding into makeshift hospitals, many suffering injuries that required urgent intervention. Doctors struggled, lacking both equipment and time. X-ray machines, still relatively new inventions, were scarce and confined mostly to large medical centers far from the front. Without the ability to see bullets or shrapnel inside a patient's body, surgeons often worked blindly, their efforts hindered by guesswork. The mortality rate grew painfully high. Marie saw this and felt a stirring inside her, not fear, but responsibility. She understood radiation in a way few others did. She knew how to generate X-rays, how to operate the equipment, how to read the images, and she realized with sudden clarity that this knowledge could save lives. She could help doctors locate injuries quickly and accurately. She could bring science directly to the battlefield. The idea, once formed, took hold of her completely. She began gathering materials, coils, tubes, generators, and glass plates transforming pieces of laboratory equipment into mobile X-ray units. She worked tirelessly, sketching designs late into the night, her desk crowded with blueprints and notes. When engineers told her the machines were too heavy, she redesigned them. When officials doubted the practicality of her plan, she argued calmly and persistently. She was not trying to win approval, she was trying to save lives. Within months, she produced the first radiological car, soon known among soldiers as a Marie Curie, a mobile X-ray unit equipped with a generator, photographic plates, and the tools needed to capture images of injuries on the spot. It was a revolutionary concept, born from urgency, determination, and the quiet brilliance that defined Marie's entire life. She personally drove the first of these vehicles to the front, her hands steady on the wheel despite the danger. She was not a soldier, not a politician, but a scientist, and she believed that was enough. When she arrived at the battlefield, doctors greeted her with a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. The sight of a small woman stepping out of a vehicle filled with unfamiliar equipment would have seemed strange under ordinary circumstances, but war had stripped away all illusions. What mattered was her knowledge, her skill, and her willingness to be there at all. Marie set up her X-ray machine, explaining calmly how to position the wounded, how to capture clear images, and how to interpret them. Within minutes, surgeons could see the exact location of bullets and shrapnel. The effect was immediate. Lives that might otherwise have been lost were saved. But Marie did not stop with one vehicle. She produced 20 mobile X-ray units and oversaw the installation of more than 100 stationary radiology rooms in emergency hospitals across France. She trained nurses, many young women with no previous scientific background, to operate the machines, teaching them with the patience she once showed her university students. They became known as the radiology nurses, a small army of women who brought clarity into the fog of war. Marie herself traveled constantly, moving between battlefields, hospitals, and supply depots. She drove over rugged terrain, often under shell fire, her determination unshaken. She slept little, ate whenever she could, and worked with the same intensity she brought to her laboratory. Her daughters, especially Irene, accompanied her at times, helping however they could. The war had taken Pierre from them in spirit, but Marie refused to let it take anything more. Despite her tireless efforts, she faced constant challenges. Fuel shortages forced her to improvise. Equipment broke under harsh conditions. Bureaucrats questioned her plans, sometimes slowing her progress with paperwork she found infuriating in its irrelevance. But Marie was not easily deterred. She wrote letters, negotiated with officials, and found creative solutions wherever she could. She levered her Nobel Prize fame not for comfort, but for access to supplies, funding, and support that could move her mobile units closer to where they were needed most. She witnessed scenes that would stay with her for the rest of her life. Soldiers carried on stretchers through mud, surgeons working with trembling hands, families waiting outside hospital tents for news that sometimes never came. But she also witnessed hope. Each clear X-ray image was a victory, each successful operation a reminder that science could shine even in the darkest corners of humanity's struggle. Marie found strength in those moments, strength that felt different from the quiet focus of her laboratory. It was strength born from urgency, compassion, and courage. Over time, the Petite Curies became an essential part of the French war effort. Soldiers and doctors came to rely on them, sometimes waiting anxiously for their arrival. Marie, humbled but steadfast, continued her work without seeking praise. She did not see herself as a hero or a pioneer. She saw herself as someone doing what needed to be done, using knowledge to serve life. Her own health, however, continued to decline. Long hours of exposure to radiation, without the protections we understand today, weakened her further. Her eyes grew sensitive to light. Her hands trembled more often. Fatigue settled into her bones like winter frost, persistent and unyielding, yet she refused to rest. She felt a duty not only to the wounded soldiers, but to Pierre's memory, to the field of science they had built together, and to the future she hoped her daughters would inherit. As the war dragged on, Marie found herself juggling multiple responsibilities. She taught courses on radiology, organized new medical units, and continued to refine the technology she had developed. Her determination began to inspire others, young women in particular, who saw in Marie a different kind of strength than the world typically portrayed. She embodied the idea that intelligence could be an act of service, curiosity a form of courage, and knowledge a light strong enough to pierce even the darkness of war. When the conflict finally ended, France was scarred, visibly, emotionally, and historically. Cities were damaged, lives shattered, futures uncertain. But amidst the destruction, Marie saw something else: resilience. The same resilience she had carried since childhood, the same resilience she saw in her daughters, the same resilience that had guided her through loss after loss. She believed deeply that the world could rebuild, and that science would help shape that rebuilding. In the immediate aftermath of the war, she faced a new challenge: the scarcity of radium, the element she had given so much of her life to understand. It was expensive, difficult to produce, and essential for continued medical and scientific research. Marie dreamed of expanding her laboratory, equipping it with the resources needed to explore radioactivity more deeply and train future researchers. But the costs were immense, far beyond what she could afford. Yet even then, she did not waver. She traveled to the United States, reluctantly stepping into a world of public appearances and fundraising efforts. She delivered speeches, met with scientists, and accepted support from individuals who admired her bravery. American journalists wrote about her modesty, noting how she traveled without jewelry, how she refused luxury, how she asked only for the means to continue her work. By the time she returned to France, she had secured enough funding to purchase a gram of radium, a treasure more valuable than gold. Her dedication during the war, her resilience afterward, and her unwavering belief in the future began to shape her legacy into something far larger than the discoveries themselves. She was no longer just a scientist or a professor or a widow. She had become a symbol of perseverance, someone who met adversity with quiet strength, someone who turned knowledge into healing, someone who showed the world that science could be both gentle and powerful. As she settled back into her work, the Petite Curies remained scattered across France, reminders of what she had built during humanity's darkest days. Hospitals continued to use X-rays, doctors continued to save lives, and soldiers who once lay wounded on cold battlefield ground lived because a woman with a calm voice and unshakable purpose had brought light where there was none. Marie rarely spoke about the war afterward. She carried its memories silently, tucked between the pages of her research, woven into the fabric of her later years. But those who knew her saw the mark it left: a quiet depth in her gaze, a softness in her voice when she spoke of human suffering, and a strengthened resolve to use science for good. The war had changed her. It had aged her. It had weakened her body, but it had also revealed something extraordinary: a new form of courage, born not in laboratories, but in fields of mud and pain. Marie Curie had walked back into the light, not by leaving darkness behind, but by carrying light into it. When the war ended and the world finally began to breathe again, Marie found herself standing at a crossroads unlike any she had faced before. The years of tireless effort on battlefields and in makeshift hospitals had left her body fragile, her hands trembling with fatigue that no amount of rest could erase, and yet her mind felt more alive than ever. She had witnessed firsthand the power of science to save lives, not in the calm of a laboratory, but in the desperate urgency of war. That experience layered her purpose with new weight, deepening a conviction that had been growing within her since childhood, that knowledge, when shared freely, could illuminate even the darkest chapters of human history. In the months that followed, Marie poured herself into her work with gentle determination. The war had shifted the priorities of the scientific community, accelerating a desire to understand radiation more deeply, its potential for healing, its risks, and the vast mysteries still hidden within its glow. But France was economically exhausted. Laboratories lacked funds, equipment, and even basic materials. Many brilliant minds faced a future clouded by scarcity. Marie understood this reality better than most. Her dream of expanding the Radium Institute, a center devoted entirely to research, teaching, and medical application, could not come to life without support far beyond what she personally had. The thought of pausing her work due to financial barriers felt unbearable. She had spent decades pushing against obstacles larger than herself, and she had never once stepped backward. Instead, she took an unusual step, one that would change the course of her legacy. With reluctance and humility, she agreed to travel to the United States to appeal for support. She had resisted the idea for months, deeply uncomfortable with public attention and resistant to any form of celebrity. But for the sake of science and for the memory of Pierre, she set aside her discomfort and prepared for a journey that would place her under the world's brightest lights. Her arrival in America was unlike anything she expected. Crowds gathered outside train stations, reporters followed her movements, and the press wrote articles describing her as a quiet titan of science. The contrast between her modest manner and her extraordinary accomplishments fascinated the public. Yet Marie remained entirely herself, composed, soft-spoken, uninterested in fame, focused only on her mission. She spoke at universities, met with scientists, and shared her vision for a future where radioactivity would continue to illuminate medicine and research. Her sincerity resonated deeply, especially among educators and philanthropists. The highlight of her trip came when she was presented with a gift of pure radium, purchased through donations from American women who admired her perseverance. They had raised a staggering sum to provide her with 1 gram of the precious element, understanding that it would unlock further discoveries and teaching opportunities at her growing institute. Marie accepted the gift with tears in her eyes, overwhelmed not by the attention, but by the evidence that her belief in collective progress had found resonance across oceans. It was not a celebration of her alone. It was a celebration of what science could accomplish when people stood together. Upon returning to France, she wasted no time putting the radium to work. Construction on the Radium Institute accelerated, and before long, the building stood proudly as a symbol of modern scientific ambition. Sunlit laboratories replaced the old damp shed. Clean, organized workspaces replaced improvised equipment, and for the first time in her life, Marie oversaw a research center built not from scraps or borrowed rooms, but from deliberate, thoughtful design. Inside its walls, young scientists would study the nature of matter, explore the mysteries of radiation, and develop treatments for conditions that once seemed hopeless. Marie's quiet pride in the Institute grew deeper each day. She walked the halls slowly, her steps soft against the polished floors, pausing to speak with students who approached her with admiration. She encouraged them gently, reminding them that every discovery, no matter how small, contributed to the larger tapestry of human understanding. Many of these students, particularly young women, saw her not just as a teacher, but as proof that they belonged in the world of science. Marie accepted the role of mentor with grace, knowing her journey had paved the way for others who once would have been denied entry to a laboratory. Her daughter Irene, now grown and brilliant in her own right, joined her as a researcher. Irene's sharp intellect and calm confidence reminded Marie of herself at a younger age, though Irene carried a spark of warmth that resembled her father. Watching her daughter thrive in the world of science filled Marie with a quiet joy that softened the aches in her bones. Together, mother and daughter conducted experiments, led lectures, and built a bond rooted not only in family, but in shared purpose. And though Marie rarely spoke about it aloud, she felt Pierre's presence in those moments, as if the chain of their life's work had never truly been broken. But as the Institute flourished, Marie's health continued to decline. The years of exposure to radiation, in laboratories, in battlefields, in the cramped shed where radium had glowed under her fingertips, had left an invisible mark inside her body. She suffered from bone pain, chronic fatigue, and eyesight that grew increasingly sensitive to light. Doctors urged her to rest, but Marie resisted, holding tightly to the work that had given her life direction since childhood. She moved slowly but purposefully through the corridors of the Institute, refusing to let her weakness overshadow her dedication. Her declining health, however, did not diminish her influence. The scientific world recognized her as a guiding star, a figure whose integrity stood above politics and dispute. She received honors, awards, and invitations to speak at international conferences. Some saw her as a symbol of scientific purity, a woman who had devoted her life to truth rather than personal gain. Others saw her as a pioneer who redefined what was possible for science, medicine, and women everywhere. Marie accepted these acknowledgments with quiet gratitude, but she always returned to her laboratory, drawn to the comfort of familiar instruments and the soft hum of discovery. Her research, even in her later years, continued to shape the future of atomic science. She explored more precise measurements of radioactivity, refined medical applications, and advised young researchers on their own projects. Her insights remained sharp, her curiosity undimmed. The world, now more aware of the dangers of radiation, began to implement protective measures that she never had. Shielding, gloves, careful handling protocols. The irony was not lost on Marie. She had walked the darkest part of the path so that others could walk safely under the light. As she grew older, Marie spent more time reflecting on the remarkable arc of her life. She thought of her childhood in Warsaw, carrying books across quiet streets under the weight of oppression. She thought of her cold attic in Paris, where frost had etched patterns on her window as she studied late into the night. She thought of the shed where she and Pierre stirred boiling cauldrons of pitchblende, chasing the faint glow of radium. And she thought of the battlefields where science had become a lifeline for the wounded. Each chapter felt like a different lifetime, yet all connected by the same thread, a belief that curiosity and compassion could alter the world. Her daughters, now grown, became central to her emotional world. Irene pursued scientific research with great promise, while Ove, with her love of writing and music, brought art and reflection into the family's orbit. Marie supported both paths equally, believing that brilliance took many forms. In quiet family evenings, she sat by the window with a blanket over her shoulders, listening to Eve play the piano while Irene shared news from the laboratory. These were the moments she cherished, moments that reminded her that life's greatest achievements were not only scientific, but human. Throughout her later years, Marie remained humble about her legacy. She rarely spoke of her Nobel Prizes, and she never used the title Madame Curie with any sense of pride. She preferred simply Marie, a name that connected her to her past, her work, and her identity as a seeker of truth. Yet the world around her continued to grow in respect and awe. Schools, laboratories, and hospitals bore her name. Researchers cited her work as foundational, and young women looked to her as living proof that brilliance was not confined by gender, circumstance, or hardship. Despite her humility, Marie did allow herself one quiet satisfaction: the knowledge that she had never compromised her principles. She had refused to patent radium, believing that knowledge belonged to humanity, not individuals. She had given her scientific life to France, her adopted country, without asking for the comforts or luxuries often granted to figures of her stature. And she had faced every challenge, from poverty to prejudice to grief, with a calm resolve that inspired generations. As the 1930s approached, Marie's health grew increasingly fragile. She tired easily, struggled to climb stairs, and felt dizzy under bright lights. Yet she kept working, kept guiding, kept offering her insight to anyone who sought it. Her colleagues often found her seated in the corner of a laboratory, wrapped in a shawl, reviewing notes or answering questions with quiet patience. She had become not just a scientist, but an elder of the scientific world, a living symbol of perseverance. In her final years, Marie completed what she considered one of her most meaningful tasks, ensuring that her institute would remain a center of excellence long after her death. She worked with administrators, trained scientists, and strengthened the programs that would outlive her. She saw clearly that the future did not belong to her, but to those she had trained. Her legacy would not be measured solely in discoveries, but in the minds she nurtured. As she grew weaker, she spent more time outdoors, walking through gardens with Irene, or sitting peacefully near the Institute's courtyard. She found solace in sunlight, in the movement of leaves, in the gentle breeze that carried the scent of earth and flowers. She often said that nature reminded her of the invisible energies she had spent her life studying, unseen forces that shaped the world quietly, continuously, without ever asking for recognition. In those peaceful moments, she reflected on the luminous thread that had carried her through life. She had followed it from Poland to Paris, from attic rooms to battlefields, from grief to discovery. It had illuminated her darkest days and guided her through the profound loneliness of losing Pierre. And now, as her strength dwindled, she felt that light resting gently on her shoulders, warm and familiar. Marie Curie, the girl who walked through Warsaw with books pressed to her chest, the woman who overturned the boundaries of science, the widow who carried a legacy alone, and the pioneer who brought light to the wounded, had lived exactly as she believed one should live, with discipline, with humility, with courage, and with a devotion to truth that never dimmed. Her journey was nearing its close, but her light, the invisible fire she had once uncovered in a dusty shed, would continue to shine long after she was gone. Chapter 9. In the final decade of Marie Curie's life, Paris carried a softness that mirrored her own gentle pace. The city had changed since the days she arrived as a young, determined student. It was older, heavier with memories of war, and yet filled with an undercurrent of renewal. Her institute stood gracefully on the quiet street where she walked each morning, a testament to everything she had fought for. But Marie no longer moved with the swift precision she once had. Her steps were slower, her breath shorter, and the radiant brilliance that had illuminated her career now rested within her like a warm ember, glowing quietly rather than burning bright. Though her body weakened, her mind remained as sharp as ever. She continued to read scientific papers, write letters, offer advice, and guide young researchers with thoughtful patience. Students often found her sitting in the corner of a laboratory, wrapped in a dark shawl, spectacles low on her nose, studying data as though time still belonged to her. They approached cautiously, knowing they were in the presence of someone legendary, someone whose discoveries had altered the course of science. Marie greeted them each with a soft nod or a calm smile, her voice steady but gentle. She never raised it. She never needed to. Respect followed her naturally. The Radium Institute had become a beacon by this time, drawing scientists from around the world. Its hallways echoed with different languages, the rustle of lab coats, the clink of glassware, and the low hum of instruments measuring radioactivity. Marie watched this with a quiet pride. It was exactly as she had envisioned, a place where knowledge could bloom freely, untethered by politics or prejudice. The researchers admired her not only for her accomplishments, but for her humility. She never boasted, never sought credit, and never allowed her name to overshadow the work of others. Her presence remained constant but unintrusive, like a steady light guiding the room without demanding attention. Her daughter Irene had become her closest scientific partner. Years of working side by side had given them a rhythm so natural it needed little conversation. Irene, strong-willed and brilliant, understood her mother's methods instinctively. They exchanged thoughts easily, sometimes with words, sometimes with glances. And as Marie's strength waned, Irene stepped forward more boldly, taking on responsibilities once shared with her mother. Marie watched this transition with both pride and nostalgia, recognizing the circle of life gently closing around her. Pierre's legacy lived in Irene, and the future of radioactivity research was safe in her hands. Yet, as much as Marie remained dedicated to her scientific world, she also felt drawn to quieter moments beyond the laboratory. She spent more time in the Institute's courtyard garden, where she would sit beneath the arching branches of a chestnut tree and listen to the rustling leaves. The sunlight that filtered through the canopy seemed softer to her now, its warmth soothing the aches that lingered in her bones. Sometimes she brought a small notebook, not for scientific data, but for reflections she rarely shared. Other times she simply watched the world in silence, allowing herself to rest, something she had never learned to do when she was younger. Her daughter Eve, now an elegant woman with a talent for writing and music, visited often. She brought stories of the world outside the Institute, concerts, literary circles, and political changes sweeping across Europe. Marie listened with calm interest, her eyes bright with affection. Eve represented the part of her life untouched by laboratories and research, a reminder that brilliance could take many shapes. Their conversations were comforting, balancing the scientific intensity that had defined so much of Marie's existence. But even as Marie embraced these peaceful moments, she could not ignore the persistent decline of her health. Her vision blurred frequently. Her energy faded without warning. She felt a heaviness in her bones that made climbing stairs a slow and deliberate act. Doctors examined her with concern, offering gentle suggestions for rest, travel, and recovery. But they struggled to identify the root of her illness. Leukemia was not yet well understood, and the link between radiation exposure and disease remained a mystery to most. Marie herself suspected the cause, though she rarely admitted it aloud. In her heart, she knew she had paid a price for the discoveries she had pursued so fearlessly. Still, she did not regret her choices. She had always understood the risks of scientific exploration, even if she had not predicted their full consequences. She believed deeply in the transformative power of knowledge, and she viewed her suffering as part of that long, winding journey. To her, the real tragedy would have been to abandon her work out of fear. She had lived exactly as she intended, with purpose, curiosity, and devotion to something greater than herself. Despite her weakening health, invitations continued to arrive from universities and scientific organizations across the world. Marie accepted only a few, choosing those that aligned most closely with her values. One of her final major public appearances was at a conference dedicated to furthering scientific collaboration among nations. She spoke with clarity and conviction, emphasizing the importance of international unity in research. Scientists listened to her with reverence, aware that they were hearing the voice of a pioneer whose contributions had transcended the boundaries of her field. The world changed rapidly during these last years of her life. New discoveries in physics, some inspired directly by her work, expanded humanity's understanding of matter and energy. Young scientists built upon her foundations, exploring the secrets of the atom with tools she once dreamed of. Some of these advancements would eventually lead to powerful technologies, both healing and destructive. Marie viewed these developments with thoughtful caution. She believed that science should serve life, not endanger it. She urged future generations to pursue discovery with ethical clarity, reminding them that knowledge was powerful but must be guided by responsibility. Her household during this time was filled with an atmosphere of gentle routine. She rose slowly in the mornings, often with Irene or Ave nearby. She dressed with care, wrapped her shawl around her shoulders, and sat by the window sipping warm tea. She read newspapers and scientific journals, her interest in the world remaining undimmed. She took short walks in the garden, greeting staff and students with quiet warmth. And she spent many hours reminiscing about Pierre, not with sadness alone, but with gratitude for the life they built and the discoveries they shared. She carried his memory like a steady flame inside her heart. As 1934 approached, Marie's health reached a critical point. She suffered frequent bouts of fever, anemia, and weakness, so profound that she could no longer stand for long periods. Her doctors urged her to enter a sanatorium in the Alps, hoping that the clean mountain air might ease her symptoms. Marie agreed reluctantly, understanding that she needed care she could no longer provide for herself. She kissed her daughters goodbye with tenderness, promising to rest and return soon. The sanatorium was peaceful, nestled high among rolling hills and pine forests. The air smelled of snowmelt and wild herbs, and the wind whistled softly through the trees. Marie spent her days resting by the window, watching clouds drift across the peaks. Nurses checked on her frequently, speaking in hushed tones as they adjusted her blankets or offered warm broth. She was calm, composed, and unafraid. She had lived through every form of hardship: poverty, discrimination, loneliness, war, and profound grief. This final chapter felt like another stage of the journey she had begun long ago. Her condition deteriorated quickly. She lost strength, her breath grew shallow, and her vision dimmed. Yet her mind remained clear until the very end. She spoke softly of her daughters, her institute, and her hopes for the future of science. She asked that her research continue, that truth be pursued without fear, and that her legacy serve not as a monument, but as a path for others to follow. On July 4, 1934, Marie Curie passed away quietly, surrounded by the gentle hush of the mountains. News of her death spread across the world with a wave of sorrow. Scientists mourned the loss of a pioneer. Nations paid tribute to her contributions. Women found inspiration in the story of a girl who had defied every barrier to change the course of history. And her daughters, one a brilliant scientist, the other an eloquent writer, carried her memory with a deep, quiet love. She was laid to rest beside Pierre, reunited after decades of separation. Their graves were simple, unadorned, just as she would have wished. Many years later, they would be moved to the Pantheon, honored among the greatest figures in French history. Yet, even there, she remained the same humble Marie, the scientist who sought truth more than praise. Her legacy, however, did not rest. It continued to grow, radiating outward like the elements she once discovered. Her research became the foundation of modern physics and medicine. Her institute flourished under Irene's leadership. Her papers remained essential reading for generations of scientists. And her life story, woven with resilience, brilliance, and grace, became a beacon for those who dared to dream. Marie Curie's light did not fade with her passing. It lived in every laboratory that studied radioactivity, in every medical treatment that used radiation to heal, and in every young mind inspired to question, explore, and imagine. She had spent her life uncovering the invisible forces that shape the world, only to become one herself, a quiet, enduring glow that continues to illuminate history. After Marie Curie's passing, the Radium Institute did not fall into silence. Instead, it breathed with a new rhythm, one shaped by the people who had grown under her guidance and by the daughters who had inherited her legacy. The corridors that once echoed with Marie's quiet footsteps now carried the soft murmur of students, the clicking of instruments, and the steady hum of experiments unfolding under the glow of lamplight. Yet even as the Institute moved forward, Marie's presence lingered like a gentle shadow. Her office remained untouched for months, her notebooks carefully preserved, her shawl folded neatly across the back of her chair. It felt to many as though she had simply stepped outside for a moment and would return to resume her work. But life, as it always did, moved on. And at the heart of that movement stood Marie Curie, who carried her mother's clarity, determination, and brilliance with natural ease. Irene was no longer the child who had followed her mother through battlefields and makeshift hospitals. She was a seasoned scientist, disciplined, sharp-minded, and deeply devoted to radioactivity research. She had studied under Marie for years, absorbing not only her methods, but her philosophy. That discovery was a responsibility, a calling, and a light that must be shared. Now Irene stepped into her place with the same quiet strength, ready to guide the Institute into its next era. Working alongside Irene was her husband, Frédéric Joliot, a brilliant young physicist with a mind as bold as hers. Their partnership, much like Marie and Pierre's, balanced clarity with creativity, discipline with imagination. They spent long hours in the laboratory, discussing theories over equipment still bearing Marie's handwriting, and conducting experiments that pushed the boundaries of known science. Their chemistry, both intellectual and personal, created a synergy that drew admiration from colleagues. It wasn't long before they embarked on a scientific path that would mirror the transformative nature of Marie and Pierre's work decades earlier. As Irene and Frédéric deepened their research, the Radium Institute transformed into an incubator of innovation. Young scientists from around the world traveled to Paris, drawn by the Institute's reputation and the allure of working under the Curie's successors. The laboratories were brighter than the old shed Marie once used, filled with modern equipment, organized storage, and protective gear that she never had. Yet, despite the improvements, a sense of continuity remained. The pursuit of truth, the respect for precision, the humility before mystery, these were values woven into the building's walls, preserved by the legacy Marie left behind. Outside the laboratory, Irene carried on her mother's tradition of teaching. She stood in lecture halls Marie once filled with her calm voice, explaining the intricate principles of radioactivity to new generations of students. Her tone was confident, steady, clear, a reflection of the education she had received both as a scientist and as Marie's daughter. Students noted her seriousness, her sharp intellect, and her determination to uphold the highest standards of scientific integrity. She demanded discipline but offered guidance, creating an environment where curiosity could flourish alongside rigor. Her sister, Eve Curie, meanwhile, carved a very different but equally meaningful path. Eve had never been drawn to laboratories or equations. She found her voice through music, writing, and the broader world of culture. After Marie's death, Eve dedicated herself to preserving her mother's story, capturing her life with tenderness and accuracy in a biography titled Madame Curie. The book offered readers a glimpse into the woman behind the discoveries, the struggles, sacrifices, and moments of quiet strength that shaped her journey. Eve's writing introduced Marie to millions who might never have understood the depth of her humanity. And in doing so, Eve created a new legacy of her own, one rooted in empathy and truth. The Curie sisters were different in almost every way, yet both shared a thread that connected them to their mother, a quiet devotion to purpose, each in her own field. Irene carried the scientific torch forward. Eve preserved the emotional truth of their history. Together, they ensured that Marie Curie's legacy remained vibrant, accessible, and deeply human. As the world moved into the 1930s, science advanced rapidly. New theories about the atom emerged, some building directly on Marie's foundations. Irene and Frederick found themselves at the center of one such breakthrough, the discovery of artificial radioactivity. It was a revelation that echoed the transformative power of Marie's early discoveries. By bombarding aluminum atoms with alpha particles, they created new radioactive elements no one had seen before. This discovery opened a new chapter in nuclear science, offering researchers the ability to generate radioactive materials at will, rather than relying solely on natural sources like radium. The scientific community recognized the significance immediately. The ripple effect was profound, touching medicine, energy, and the emerging understanding of nuclear processes. And in 1935, Irene and Frederick were awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry, making Irene the second woman in her family to earn the prestigious honor. The moment echoed the brilliance of her parents, yet Irene accepted it with the same humility Marie once showed. She spoke of the work, not the fame, of the possibilities, not the prestige, and of the responsibility of science, not its triumphs. Eve, watching from a distance, felt immense pride in her sister's achievement. She wrote about Irene with admiration, capturing the blend of discipline and passion that defined her. She also tended to Marie's legacy as diligently as any scientist cared for experiments, organizing archives, preserving letters, and ensuring that her mother's work remained accessible to future scholars. Eve's contributions often went unnoticed by the scientific world, but they were essential. Through her writing, she ensured that Marie Curie remained more than a name in textbooks. She became a person, complex, humble, devoted, and deeply human. As Europe approached the brink of another war in the late 1930s, the Curie family felt the tremors of uncertainty once again. Irene and Frederick, aware of the destructive potential of nuclear science, faced moral dilemmas that their mother's generation had never imagined. Their discovery of artificial radioactivity placed them at the crossroads of incredible promise and devastating possibility. They chose caution, refusing to disclose certain details that could be used for harmful purposes. They understood perhaps more deeply than anyone the dual nature of scientific power, its potential to heal and its capacity to destroy. Eve, meanwhile, traveled widely as a journalist, covering global events with clarity and courage. Her work during the Second World War would eventually earn her recognition as one of the most insightful reporters of her era. She interviewed leaders, witnessed frontline realities, and wrote with a blend of precision and compassion that mirrored her mother's pursuit of truth. Though her path differed from Irene's, she carried the same courage Marie had shown in war, a willingness to step into danger in service of something greater than herself. Back in France, Irene continued to teach and guide research throughout the war. The Radium Institute became a symbol of resilience, standing firm even as the world around it shook. She protected scientific records, assisted colleagues, and maintained her work despite the hardships that accompanied wartime life. Her dedication echoed Marie's own resilience in earlier decades, proving that courage was not an isolated trait, but a thread woven through generations. When the war finally ended, both sisters emerged as figures of profound influence. Irene continued her research and public service, eventually becoming an advocate for peaceful nuclear development. Eve became a humanitarian leader, working with organizations like UNICEF to support recovery efforts around the world. Each embodied a different facet of Marie Curie's legacy: the pursuit of knowledge, the commitment to humanity, and the belief that truth, in all its forms, must be wielded with responsibility. As the decades passed, the world's understanding of radioactivity deepened, revealing consequences Marie could not have foreseen. Physicians recognized the dangers she had faced in her unprotected research. Her notebooks, still glowing faintly with the traces of radiation, were stored in lead-lined boxes. Her laboratory equipment became historical relics, markers of a time when science was pursued with both devotion and innocence. Her life became a reminder of the cost pioneers often pay for discoveries that enrich future generations. Yet, even as awareness of radiation's dangers grew, so did appreciation for its gifts. Treatments for cancer advanced, medical imaging improved, and new technologies emerged. The Curie family, Marie, Pierre, Irene, and Frederick, stood at the very foundation of these developments. Their contributions stretched far beyond their lifetimes, touching countless lives around the world. In Paris, the Radium Institute evolved into a premier center for cancer research and radiation therapy. The building itself felt like a living tribute, its walls adorned with photographs of Marie and Pierre, its libraries filled with Irene and Eve's writings, its laboratories humming with the quiet pursuit of discovery. Students from across the globe arrived to study, inspired not only by the science, but by the stories woven into the Institute's history. Many stood before Marie's preserved office, the shawl on her chair, the handwritten notes on her desk, feeling as though they had stepped into a sacred space. Irene, following her mother's example, continued her work until illness overtook her in 1956. She too had paid a price for exposure to radiation. She too met her fate with dignity, calmness, and the unwavering belief that science served a purpose beyond individual existence. Eve lived much longer, dedicating herself to diplomacy and humanitarian work, ensuring that her family's story reached those who needed it most. In the quiet corners of the Radium Institute, a story continued to unfold, a story not just of discoveries, but of devotion. The Curie family had shaped an entire century of science through intellect, courage, and sacrifice. They had faced wars, prejudice, illness, and loss, yet they carried forward a light that refused to dim. Marie's legacy did not end with her. It continued through her daughters, through their discoveries, through the people they inspired, through every mind awakened by curiosity. She had once uncovered the invisible fire within matter. Now, generations carried that fire within themselves. Long after the Curie family had etched their names into the story of science, the world found itself living inside the consequences and the possibilities of what they had uncovered. The quiet glow of radioactivity, first observed in a dim shed behind the School of Physics and Chemistry, now touched medicine, technology, energy, and the deepest theories about the universe. Yet even as the field expanded, many scientists looked back at its beginnings with a mixture of awe and humility. The Curies had opened a door that would never again be closed, and the generations that followed would spend decades exploring the vast landscape beyond it. The early 20th century became a whirlwind of discoveries. Researchers studied radioactive decay, atomic structure, and the strange behavior of particles that defied classical physics. Laboratories across Europe and America filled with instruments designed to measure what Marie had once called the invisible rays. Young scientists, many inspired by her story, followed the faint trails left by radium, polonium, and the phenomena she named. They were no longer walking blindly into the unknown. They were following a path illuminated by the Curie family's relentless perseverance. Yet the discoveries that emerged were unlike anything anyone expected. Radioactivity, once a curiosity, revealed itself to be a key to understanding the atom, the fundamental building block of matter. The idea that atoms could transform, decay, or release unimaginable amounts of energy shifted the foundations of physics. The universe, once thought to be fixed and stable, now appeared fluid, dynamic, alive. Scientists recognized that the smallest particles carried secrets capable of rewriting humanity's understanding of creation itself. As theories evolved, so did the questions. What powered the sun? How old was the earth? How did matter form? Why did atoms hold together at all? In quiet offices and dim laboratories, physicists scribbled equations on chalkboards, their minds racing to keep up with discoveries that seemed to accelerate with each passing year. Names like Einstein, Rutherford, Bohr, and Fermi joined the scientific dialogue, each adding pieces to the puzzle Marie had set into motion. The field of nuclear physics, once unimaginable, became a centerpiece of modern science. But progress did not move in a single direction. As with all powerful discoveries, radioactivity revealed both its brilliance and its shadow. Researchers handling radioactive materials began to show signs of illness similar to the symptoms Marie herself had experienced. Doctors grew increasingly aware of the biological risks: burns, anemia, and mysterious infections that did not heal. Laboratories implemented precautionary measures, shielding and distance, gloves, and protective clothing. And yet the eerie glow of radium continued to fascinate the public, leading to a new wave of commercial products that used radioactive materials without understanding their danger. It was an era of contradiction, excitement, and ignorance intertwined. Radium appeared in face creams, tonics, paints, and even children's toys. Advertisements claimed it restored youth, cured fatigue, and brought vitality to the body. Watch dials were painted with luminous radium compounds, glowing softly in the dark. Factories hired young women by the hundreds to apply the paint with fine brushes, many licking the tips for precision. They worked under the same illusion Marie once held, that something so beautiful, so glowing, could not possibly harm them. But harm it did. The radium girls, as history would later call them, began to fall ill. Their bones weakened, teeth fell out, and their bodies emitted faint radiation detectable by instruments. Many suffered agonizing deaths. Their tragedy shocked the public and forced governments to confront the unregulated use of radioactive materials. It marked a turning point, a painful reminder that even the most brilliant discoveries demanded responsibility. Laws were passed, safety protocols were established, and the world began to understand the dual nature of the invisible fire Marie had helped reveal. As the dangers became more apparent, another truth surfaced. The immense power stored within the atom could be harnessed for purposes far beyond medicine. In research centers across the world, scientists studied nuclear reactions with increasing precision, unaware that their work was paving the way for technologies that would reshape history. It was a difficult paradox. The same principles that enabled cancer treatments could also unleash unprecedented destruction. The atom held both healing and devastation, and humanity would soon be forced to choose how to wield it. Through all these rapid developments, the Curie family remained at the center of scientific thought, if not in person, then through their legacy. Irene and Frederick's work on artificial radioactivity helped establish the foundation for nuclear energy and modern medical treatments. Their contributions acted like stepping stones for future breakthroughs. Irene, with her calm logic and unwavering discipline, often spoke publicly about the ethical use of nuclear science, warning that progress without conscience would lead humanity into dangerous territory. Her words echoed Marie's own belief that science must always serve life. Yet history, unpredictable and swift, carried the world towards a path no one fully foresaw. In the late 1930s and early 1940s, nuclear physics broke open in ways that frightened even those who understood it best. The discovery of nuclear fission, the splitting of atoms, revealed a force so powerful that it made lightning storms seem delicate by comparison. Governments raced to control it, pouring resources into secret programs. Scientists felt the weight of their discoveries pressing down upon them. Many had chosen science to improve the world, not to threaten it. They were torn between curiosity and conscience, progress and peril. The atomic age dawned in 1945 with a light far brighter and more violent than Marie Curie had ever dreamed possible. The devastation that followed shook the world to its core. For the first time, the public understood the unimaginable energy hidden within matter, the same energy Marie had uncovered with curiosity and humility. Cities were destroyed, lives were lost. And humanity stared into a future shaped by its own discoveries, uncertain of whether science had brought salvation or destruction. Many scientists, including those inspired by the Curies, struggled with the implications. They questioned the morality of their research, the responsibility of knowledge, and the burden of unintended consequences. Yet even in the midst of fear and turmoil, one truth remained clear. The science itself was not evil. It was neutral, a force that responded to human intention. The light Marie discovered could heal or harm. The choice rested not in atoms, but in people. In the decades that followed, efforts to restore trust in science grew steadily. Nuclear medicine emerged as one of the most promising fields of healing, using radiation to detect and treat diseases with precision. Radiotherapy, once experimental, became a cornerstone of cancer treatment, saving millions of lives. The Radium Institute expanded, becoming a global center for research, medicine, and training. Its halls echoed with the footsteps of scientists continuing the work Marie had started, using knowledge not for destruction, but for compassion. Marie Curie's legacy evolved into something far larger than any single discovery. She became a symbol of ethical science, a reminder that brilliance must be paired with responsibility. Her story was taught in universities, her name engraved in research centers, her life studied by historians, scientists, and students. She represented not only scientific progress, but also the courage to pursue knowledge in spite of hardship, prejudice, and uncertainty. Her notebooks, still radioactive after decades, remained sealed in protective boxes, silent evidence of the risks she took willingly for the sake of truth. Meanwhile, the Curie family's influence continued through Irene and Frederick, whose research shaped policies, guided scientific development, and inspired new generations. Their daughter, Hélène, became a respected nuclear physicist. Their son, Pierre Joliot, devoted his life to biology and biochemistry. The scientific spirit passed down through the Curie bloodline, proving that curiosity could flow through generations like a quiet, steady current. Eve Curie, the gentle writer of the family, played her own role in shaping public understanding. Her biography of Marie was translated into dozens of languages, touching the hearts of readers worldwide. Through her words, people learned not only about scientific discovery, but about the humanity behind it, the struggles, the sacrifices, the quiet triumphs. Eve's work ensured that Marie Curie would not be remembered merely as a scientist, but as a whole person, complex, humble, and deeply resilient. By the time the mid-20th century arrived, the world had begun to find balance between the promise and peril of radioactivity. Hospitals used radiation to treat cancer. Power stations harnessed nuclear energy. Researchers continued to explore the structure of the atom, unraveling mysteries that reached far beyond Earth, into the origins of stars, galaxies, and the universe itself. Every breakthrough traced its roots back to the moment Marie held a faintly glowing sample of radium in her hands. In quiet moments, scientists reflected on the lineage of their field. They thought of Marie in her cold attic, studying by moonlight. They thought of Pierre scribbling theories late into the night. They thought of the shed where the earliest samples of radium glowed softly in the dark. And they thought of Irene and Frederick, whose discoveries expanded the reach of radioactivity even further. The story of nuclear science was not a tale of cold equations and distant theories. It was a story of people, dreamers, thinkers, families, and of one woman in particular who had walked through hardship with unwavering grace. As the world continued onward, Marie Curie's influence remained impossibly vast, too large to measure, too deep to fully express. She had discovered something invisible, something powerful, something dangerous, something beautiful. And in doing so, she had unknowingly shaped the destiny of nations, the direction of science, and the lives of millions. Her light, the invisible fire she had once brought out of the shadows, now lived in every radiology room, every cancer treatment center, every physicist's research, and every student's imagination. It lived in the glow of scientific curiosity that stretched across generations. Marie Curie had shown humanity that the smallest particles held worlds within them, and that the human spirit, when guided by courage and kindness, could illuminate even the darkest unknowns. Long after Marie Curie's life had come to a close, the world continued to move under the influence of her discoveries. The quiet glow she once observed in a darkened shed had transformed into a scientific legacy that reached far beyond the halls of any institute or laboratory. Her story lived in textbooks, in medical practices, in the aspirations of young scientists who saw in her a model of courage and humility. Yet even as science progressed, becoming faster, louder, and more complex, Marie's legacy remained grounded in a gentle truth, that the pursuit of knowledge, when approached with sincerity, could transcend the limitations of any era. Throughout the mid-20th century, the Radium Institute evolved into one of the world's foremost centers for nuclear research. Its laboratories became brighter, its instruments more precise, and its students increasingly diverse. Yet despite its evolution, the Institute never forgot its origins. Portraits of Marie and Pierre hung in quiet corners, their notebooks sat preserved in lead-lined cases, still too radioactive to touch, and each year, new researchers paused in front of Marie's simple wooden desk, the one she used until the end of her life, feeling a strange closeness to the past, as though her presence lingered in the silence between their own thoughts. The corridors of the Institute often echoed with stories told by older scientists who had known Marie personally. They spoke not of grandeur, but of the small details, the way she tucked loose strands of hair behind her ear, the careful way she handled glassware, the soft cadence of her voice when she explained something complicated. They remembered her long hours, her worn shoes, her quiet smile when an experiment succeeded after months of struggling. These memories lived like lanterns carried from one generation to the next, humble, glowing reminders that great discoveries were often built on simple acts of persistence. As the decades unfolded, the world found new ways to carry forward Marie Curie's legacy. Women entered scientific fields in greater numbers, many citing Marie as the spark that ignited their ambitions. Scholarships were established in her name, educational programs honored her story. Even those far removed from the laboratory felt a sense of admiration for the woman who had crossed borders, endured hardship, and changed the world with nothing more than determination and a quiet mind filled with questions. Her life became a beacon, not just for scientists, but for anyone who had ever felt underestimated, overlooked, or discouraged by circumstance. She became proof that brilliance was not born from privilege or perfect conditions, but from resilience, the kind of strength carried quietly, without complaint, by those who believe deeply in what they pursue. Her story found its way into classrooms, museums, documentaries, and the hearts of millions who saw in her a rare combination of intellect and humility. Meanwhile, the world continued to wrestle with the dual nature of radioactivity. Scientists recognized the profound responsibility that came with knowledge. Nations debated how to wield nuclear power, how to regulate its risks, and how to harness its potential for healing. In every debate, in every advancement, Marie's story served as an example of how science should be guided, not by ambition alone, but by conscience, not by power, but by purpose. As time passed, the fields of nuclear medicine and radiology blossomed into essential branches of modern healthcare. Hospitals relied on radiation to detect tumors, treat cancer, and understand illnesses that once hid in the body's shadows. Each machine, each procedure, carried within it a lineage that traced back to a young woman stirring vats of pitchblende in a freezing shed. Marie Curie had not lived to see the full impact of her discoveries, but the world felt their touch every day. Her daughter's contributions, too, echoed across the decades. Irene's work in artificial radioactivity expanded the possibilities of nuclear science. Eve's humanitarian efforts brought hope to communities far removed from laboratories, embodying the compassion that also flowed quietly through their mother's life. The Curie name became more than a legacy. It became a constellation of stories, each shining with its own form of brilliance, each guiding the next generation toward a future shaped by knowledge and care. As the world reached the late 20th century, Marie Curie's influence continued to grow. Her life became a symbol of perseverance for those fighting for gender equality. Her methods became foundational lessons for young researchers, and her principles, humility, service, truth, became cornerstones of ethical science. Even in classrooms filled with modern technology, students found themselves fascinated by the story of a woman who once carried sacks of ore on her back, determined to understand the invisible forces within the earth. In many ways, Marie became a paradoxical presence, a scientist whose work was deeply technical, yet whose legacy felt profoundly human. She bridged the gap between the physical world and the emotional one, showing that discovery was not merely a matter of intellect, but of heart. Her journals revealed exhaustion, occasional doubt, and quiet grief, but they also showed unwavering determination, quiet joy, and a constant devotion to truth. These dualities made her story resonate across cultures and time, giving new meaning to the idea that science is, at its core, a human endeavor. In the 21st century, advances in physics, chemistry, and medicine continued to build on the foundations laid by the Curie family. Researchers explored quantum mechanics, nuclear fusion, radiopharmaceuticals, and particle therapy. Every breakthrough, no matter how distant from her original work, carried echoes of her curiosity. Laboratories worldwide displayed photographs of her, not as decoration, but as a reminder that every discovery began with someone who dared to ask a question no one else had asked. Marie Curie's final gift to the world was not radium nor polonium, nor the field of radioactivity itself. It was the example of a life lived with unwavering integrity, a life that demonstrated that scientific progress must be pursued with both courage and compassion, a life that showed how knowledge, when guided by purpose, could transform not only the world, but the people who inhabit it. Even now, her legacy extends into places she never imagined. Researchers studying cancer treatments, engineers designing reactors, students learning the nature of atoms, children reading stories about her in brightly colored books. Her voice, gentle, thoughtful, persistent, echoes softly through the generations, reminding them all that brilliance is not an accident. It is a choice, a devotion, a lifelong promise to keep searching for truth. And so the invisible fire she once uncovered continues to glow, not only in laboratories, but in the minds of everyone who believes that knowledge can shape a better future. Her light did not fade when her life ended. It spread, quietly, steadily, beautifully. Marie Curie's immortality was never in her discoveries alone. It was in the way she lived, with humility, resilience, and an unshakable belief that even the smallest spark of curiosity could illuminate the world. As we come to the end of Marie Curie's story, allow yourself to drift into the quiet warmth of her legacy. Her life reminds us that the world's greatest transformations often begin with a single question, a single moment of courage, or a single step into the unknown. Marie walked that path with grace, discipline, and a calm strength that outlived her by generations. If you're listening as you rest, may her story settle softly around you, a reminder that persistence matters, that kindness matters, and that light can emerge from even the darkest places. And as you close your eyes, carry with you the gentle truth her life revealed, that every human being, no matter how humble their beginnings, carries the potential to change the world in quiet, extraordinary ways. Good night, and thank you for listening.